Hi everyone, welcome to Life Edge, because life just doesn't have to be mediocre, and it won't be today, I guarantee it. I'm Rick Zanotti, and I am joined today by Harold Muliati, who's not only doing the video switching, he's also co-hosting. Dr. Susan Nash could not make it. Oh, she was ticked. She really wanted to be on this show today. But she's in Argentina, of all places, which happened to be where I was born a long time ago. We immigrated here when I was 3, but she's in Argentina at a tech conference, of all places again. So she couldn't make it, but she'll be back next week, and the following month she'll be here for the rest of the year. Anyway, here we go. This show is sponsored by Relate Corporation at www.relate.com, your training and video partner. So our guest today is Richard Phillips. He's a very well-known author. He writes science fiction. He's writing fantasy novels right now. You're seeing a little bit about his background here. We can talk about that in a moment. If you haven't read any of Richard's books, you should. They're great. They're really a lot of fun.
And here's Richard.
Yes, welcome to the show, Richard. This is Richard Phillips, very well-known author, West Point grad, got his master's in nuclear physics, and you've got a computer science degree too, right?
No, I don't have a computer science degree, but I did a lot of work in computer science. In fact,
it shows in your writings too.
The entire time I was working at Los Alamos, I was modifying a nuclear simulation code.
That's interesting. Now, I've seen some interviews with you in the past, and you've mentioned that you had top secret clearance, and you've gotten to see things that most people don't see. So we know some things, if we ask you, you may say can't confirm or deny. But how much of your work influenced your writing?
Well, I would say both things. Being in the Army influenced my writing, and I use that a lot in a lot of the action sequences. And being in an Army, having gone through Army Ranger training and that kind of thing. But once working at the lab influenced it a lot. I loved doing my thesis work at Los Alamos National Laboratory. It's this beautiful place up in the mountains of northern New Mexico. And it was cool. It's a cool place. It's where they developed the atomic bomb. And so there's a lot of history there. And then I was able to also use some general knowledge of the labs, like when I worked at Lawrence Livermore National Lab for 3 years. And that really helped me add some flavor to the science fiction books.
Good flavor, because they're full of, it's amazing the worlds you've created in the books and the worlds you continue to create. Now you're doing a fantasy series. I've just started reading one of those too. I'm on the first one right now, the Endarian Prophecy. And, but let's talk about Rho Agenda first. Harold, could you roll the little Rho Agenda video?
Yes.
We have a little trailer to show you folks of the first series that Richard created. I've read all of them. They're great. Absolutely great books. And those books, if you like science fiction, you will enjoy these very, very much. If you like thrillers, if you like action adventure, you'll also enjoy these. We were talking a little bit pre-show, and Richard, you are a guy with an amazing imagination. You create worlds and worlds upon worlds, and they're pretty detailed too. It's not like you're just coming up with an idea. You're coming up with a whole world with cultural things behind the world, how they've evolved, this and that. I find that fascinating, the amount of detail you put without making it boring. You just keep it moving. That's a skill.
Well, I had to work on that. I got better over time.
Well, I'm reading the first book because I was telling you pre-show that I've read the series kind of out of sequence, partly because of the way Amazon showed it. So I bought the first, I guess the prequel books at the beginning, not realizing that I had missed the rest of the series until after the fact, and went, all right. Though you couldn't tell. It's written so that almost anywhere you jump in, you're pretty much on to what's going on for the most part. But once I got into the sequence of it, it was amazing how it evolved from one thing to another. And there's no I would say there's no boredom in the books ever. It just goes. It goes and it goes and goes and goes. And even when I got to the end of the series, I was thinking there's got to be more. There's got to be more. And hopefully there is. But because it always leaves that appetite going for, these are good. We want more of this. And what made you want to become a writer?
Well, I had actually wanted to, my love of reading actually made me want to write. I love sci-fi and I also love fantasy, but sci-fi was really my favorite genre growing up and even as an adult. And over the years, I thought, well, I think I'd like to write a fantasy novel. So in the late 90s, I started writing a fantasy novel, but I ran into this problem where I would write a little bit, and my plan was I would write a section, and then I'd write another section, and then, part-time and nights and weekends, I would eventually finish it. But I got in this terrible habit where I would write a section, and then when I was getting ready to start on the next section, I would go back and I would read what I had just written, and I didn't like it. And so then I would start reworking it, right? And I'd rework it, and then I'd add a little bit. And it got into this habit that just ground me to a halt. And finally, one day, my wife, Carol, came up to me and she said, "Rick, please finish the damn book. you can edit it later."
You know what? You're not alone. I think I've written 35 books the same way. I never finished any of them. It's like I start, and then I start going, no, I don't like that. Let me do it again. No, I don't like that. I forget that. Let's do a different book. And I've done. That was when I was way younger, and I just finally said, one day I'll write. I just don't. You're right. It's a discipline, and you can't auto-criticize yourself too much.
Well, and plus you get better by the end of the book.
Yeah, yeah.
And there's this great thing, you can go back and change stuff. It's called editing.
Yeah, that's funny. But when you wrote the second ship, that was in 2006. That has so much fun in it. I'm surprised, or maybe you know something we don't know. Any movie coming out on that one? Because it is so made for a movie.
We're actually trying to negotiate a deal right now. We're talking with several studios, my agent and I, and we're pitching a 6-season Netflix series. Like if you've seen Stranger Things, this kind of falls in that genre.
That would be really cool, because you've got the perfect character development. The teenagers that start out with, they're great. It's just a perfect, your evil villains who are just pretty darn evil, and they just fit. They fit. It would be great for, and the way it moves, it's perfect for, like you said, a series, a movie, anything like that. That'll be cool. I hope that works out for you.
Well, we'll see. We're pushing it hard. We've got our pitch down pat, so we're we're working on it.
Yeah, no, it's a lot better than some of the stuff out there. So I sure hope it makes it, because it's fun. I think people have fun too, and you'll also hit the young generation, which is good too, because nothing more than kids like to do is to watch kids in a series, and these are smart kids. They're fun and bright, and the things they do are pretty cool. I won't give any spoilers away on the show, but if you read the series, especially on the second ship, it immediately just draws you right in. Yeah, within seconds you're in. It doesn't take long.
Right.
And the characters are fun.
You know, it's about these three high school friends, and they are drawn to this cloaked alien starship, and then drawn into it, and they get altered, and it just messes up their life. I mean, they got this overly comfortable life in the second ship. It seems like almost the Waltons.
Yep.
Then that life just gets ripped apart by what they are turned into and what they become.
Yeah. And yet through it all, there's some humor. There's just a lot of good stuff in it, and it does keep you. Like last night, I was up late. That's probably why I was a little bit tired today. I was up late trying to finish the book, and I go, "Oh darn, I'm not going to make it." It was already like 1:00. I said, "I got to go to bed," but it draws. I didn't want to give it up. And so this is like I was when I was a teenager. I want to go back and finish this book. Whereas, there's a lot of books you kind of read and go, yeah, it's okay, it's fun, not that big a deal. These, I don't know, I think there's something you do that's magical in these books that just holds the attention. And I think
another
good
thing is the audiobook actor. He's the one that he does all but one of my Rho Agenda audiobooks, and he just was unavailable for one of them. But anyway, he is actually absolutely terrific in the way he tells the story.
And he's got a lot of voices.
Oh, he does.
He's amazing. Because it's one guy doing the girl voices, the guy voices, the whatever voices, and you can always tell the differences. He's very good at it.
Well, and one thing he does that I really like is he does not overdo the voices. Some audiobook actors put so much difference into the voice, it really distracts you out of the story. Mm-hmm. And McLeod Andrews does not do that.
No, he keeps it moving. He has a good style to it all. I think I've listened to all. I bought the Kindles, but then I also got all the Audibles, and I wound up listening to the Audibles more. And he's good. He's definitely good and keeps it going. But the books are easy reads. They're fun. They're easy to read and just have a good time with. In the book, like for example, when I'm reading Second Ship, it's interesting because there's a lot of stuff there that you talk about, which was probably on the edge of coming out in terms of technology. And all of a sudden, I looked back and that's 13 years ago. And a lot of the stuff you talk about is now here. In many ways, whether it's new internet things, whether it's communications things are definitely coming out of that. Any other things that you foresee from that book that are going to be coming out as technology soon?
Well, there's a bunch of things that are close to happening. One is quantum computing, and quantum computing, it's very difficult to do because at the basis of it is not transistors. It's what they call qubits, spelled Qubits. Anyway, these things function in multiple states simultaneously. So these computers, if they can get this down, one of these computers will be more powerful than all the supercomputers we've got on the planet right now.
Yeah, the speed alone of what they can do.
Well, and also with the kind of increased popularity of things like because quantum computers are thought to be, they're probably going to be very effective at things like cryptography, and with things like cryptocurrency becoming more mainstream, with large companies using blockchain-based currencies and many companies planning to release those, they might become a large part of sort of our financial world as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's interesting because they've been talking about quantum computing for a decade already, if not more, but you don't hear much about it. Cold fusion is another thing. Remember how popular it was about 15 years? Everybody talked cold fusion. And then it just sort of got quiet. You don't hear much about it.
It was really funny on cold fusion. I was actually working on my thesis at Los Alamos National Laboratory when that happened. Ponce and his partner came out, Fleischmann and Pons, came out with their announcement, and everything at the lab seemed to stop. And all of these scientists were trying to build that experiment and see if they could replicate it. And it was just wild excitement for a while.
Was anybody ever able to replicate it?
There were a couple that were able to replicate it, but then the problem was they accidentally made a mistake in their experiment. And so the neutrons they were looking for turned out to have been leaked into the experiment from the apparatus they were using. So it got debunked. So there are still some people out there trying to play around with it and see if they can make that happen, but it's pretty well debunked in the scientific community now.
So you don't think it'll ever happen?
Well, I don't see anybody making any progress on it.
Yeah, you don't hear anything at all. I was before I knew you were coming on several weeks ago or about a month ago. I was starting to do some more research on cold fusion just to find out there's nothing. You just don't read anything on it. It's like it all ended way back when. So I figured one of two things. It's there and the governments have it, or it's not there and it maybe never will be there. Hard to say.
I mean, it seems to me like they've
you know,
had quite... Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Oh,
well, the governments right now, I don't think that most of the scientific community thinks it's feasible. However, if you could look back 100 years, there were lots of things that we thought were not feasible, which are now everyday things.
Yeah, that's true.
That's definitely true. But I just wonder, because, it seems like at the current state of nuclear physics, we're having a hard time getting any sort of sustained fusion reaction at all. I mean, maybe once that technology becomes more developed, then it'll seem more possible. I don't know.
Well, the old joke in the nuclear physics community is that not cold fusion, but fusion energy is only 10 years away. And every year it's 10 years away.
Yep.
It's always 10 years away.
Yep. It just keeps staying ahead of us.
Those hydrogen atoms, it's their fault. They don't want to cooperate.
Yeah.
What do you think the future of nuclear energy on the whole is? I think it gets beat up a lot by the media and the press, but they don't understand what the heck they're talking about 90% of the time. It has worked in quite a few countries.
Well, the fission energy, where it's the standard fission reaction, that they have really refined the reactors, and so they're a lot cleaner, a lot safer than they used to be. But it got a bad name.
I know.
So it's difficult politically to get, companies to invest that kind of. It takes them about 10 years to build a reactor, and to invest that much money, and you're not sure of the political environment if they're going to shut you down before you get done.
Right.
It makes it hard to do.
Yeah, it's interesting because I know a lot of the Navy ships, for example, have nuclear reactors, like a lot of the aircraft carriers. And one of those can keep that ship going, 5 years straight? No, it's amazing.
Right. I mean, there's maintenance that has to be done
Yes.
on the fuel rods and stuff like that. But it is an amazing power source. And look at all the probes that are the ones that really go out there, like the original probes and stuff like that.
Yep.
They all had nuclear reactors on board, a little bit of a different type. It was an ion reactor, but
Yes.
But the nuclear power is the only way to power something for extended periods of time.
Now, in your books, you come up with some different or interesting ways of moving ships. I think there was attraction, there's sort of an attraction thing with moons, and I remember you were doing some stuff that was pretty interesting and pretty reasonable. Ships going into kind of a subspace and coming out of it.
Right. Well, I had to come up with a theory that would be consistent for my Rho Agenda books. And so I started just basically questioning some of the things that we just assume are physics facts, like the speed of light being a constant being one of them, and another one being conservation of energy. Well, these are basic tenets of all of our physics. But if you ask yourself, what if energy really is not conserved? And the way I did that in the book is I said, okay, there's a well-known phenomenon where when you look at the stars that are from us are redshifted the most. So the explanation for that whole redshift is the farther away you go, the more redshifted the stars are that you see. And so the way that's interpreted is a Doppler shift, like a train going by, you hear the tone change once it's going away from you. And that the farthest away stars were thrown out the hardest from the Big Bang. So they're going the fastest. So that's why they have the red shift. But I asked the question, what if that's not true at all? What if there's another reason for the red shift? And what I came up with was that for every step a light wave takes, what if it was leaking a tiny fraction of its energy into subspace, a space between the quantum grains of our universe? Mm-hmm. And so it's losing a tiny fraction of its energy into subspace, and that would cause it to have that same red shift. It would gradually get less and less energetic the farther it went. So the things that the farthest out would have the most of a redshift to them. And so that was just backstory. I didn't go into all that kind of detail like that right there. But then I started thinking about, well, what if we could wrap a field around a spaceship and shift it into subspace? Mm-hmm. Then it wouldn't be constrained by the speed of light in our space-time.
Yeah. And that's, when I was reading the books, I was going, that makes all the sense in the world to me. I was just going, that could work. It could work. It could be very interesting. And, so I don't think your theories are that far off from something that could be probable. It's interesting.
So it's just, when you're telling a story, especially a science fiction story, you just need a framework of that has to establish a consistent set of rules. Otherwise, you're just jumping around all over the place, and you can't really tell a convincing, believable story.
Yeah, and then you get nerds that read your book and they get mad because they start pointing out, hey, this isn't consistent with this. This one makes sense physically.
Yeah, well, it's not called science fiction.
Yep. And some science fiction, even Star Trek, was based quite a bit on a lot of theories and a lot of probabilities of what could happen. A little bit different. I mean, we know now much more than we did in 1964 when that show first came out. And we've probably debunked some of it and came up with other ideas. I kind of agree with you. I don't think that that there's never a loss of matter or energy. I have a feeling things do get lost. It just kind of makes more sense, because even if you change ice to water, water back to ice, you're still losing, or to steam. Well, you're still losing part of it. The steam is a little different from the water, and I don't know. I don't believe it's 100% the same. I don't even know if they've done experiments to prove that, but it just.
Well, there's been quite a few experiments that validate the conservation of energy. Now, there's this thing called entropy, which means
right.
If you blow out a puff of smoke, if you're a smoker, then it just doesn't stay in a nice regular formation. It kind of drifts around and separates out through the room. And so that is going on in space all the time too.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's pretty interesting. But so you have a passion for writing. You've got a passion for science fiction and for fantasy. And by the way, let's talk a little bit about the new one. Do we have the trailer for that one?
We do, yes.
The Endarian Prophecy. I just started reading the first book in this series, and again found it interesting. Again, your imagination's always great, and the way you took it. Now, I've never seen Game of Thrones, short of a little bit of it, not much, but I was going, maybe similar. It's different. It's very different. Not so, at least from what I've read so far, which is about half of the first book. It's not as quote unquote political, though. There's a lot of intrigue. There's a lot of magic and fantasy in it. I love the way the wizards can manage elementals, and it's pretty cool. Very well described in how they do it, and the heroine of the series, pretty believable. She's a good character again, similar to other characters that you've done. What prompted the fantasy change from the science fiction to more of a fantasy type thing? Because they're very different genres.
Well, I had told you a little bit before the show that when I first started writing in my spare time, I wanted to write a fantasy novel, one of the big, thick ones. And that actually turned into the genesis that I revised into this fantasy series I call the Endarian Prophecy. Now, it was only a part of that, and I really changed a lot of stuff in it. Mark of Fire is the first book in the series. And this is really also a coming-of-age story. I mean, the heroine in this book, Carol Rayful, she is a newbie wielder of magic. So she's just learning how to control magic, but she has a really terrific natural talent for it. And it turns out that there was this ancient guy that had this ability to see through time, and he created this prophecy called the Endarian Prophecy that said that this woman, Carol Rayful, would destroy this immortal bad guy. And so I don't want to give it away, but so this bad guy is out to get rid of her and make sure that prophecy doesn't come about. But anyway, so after I got done with my Rho Agenda series, I went back and I looked at the original book I had written. And of course, it was pretty crappy. And I just reworked it. I changed a bunch of stuff in it, but it served as the basic background that I got this story going from.
Interesting. It's funny how it comes back, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know what? That's good. You hung on to it, which is it's good because you saw something in it, and I tell you, I like it. I like the Mark of Fire. At first, I was kind of trying to get into where are we? Because it's just very different. And then when you started getting into the character buildup of the main character and some of the other ones, all of a sudden, it gets you again. You have that gift of grabbing someone, and it's interesting. It's very interesting how magic plays a part of it. It's kind of like another dimension of ourselves. And I like her teacher, and at least as far as I've gotten to, he's hilarious. He just kind of throws her into it and says, "Have at it." And that's one way to learn, right? Trial by fire. But it's
yeah,
good.
That's one way.
It's good, and again, it is your style again of moving it along, of moving things and keeping the action going. And not to say that it trivializes anything, because it doesn't. You go into details quite a bit, but it's amazing how you have that sense of time, and that I think is where.
One thing I really liked in Game of Thrones, George R.R. Martin has this terrific way of really frustrating you with all the politics that are going on and the red tape, and sometimes it gets annoying because all the people you've invested yourself into wind up dying. I mean, the good guy is pretty much guaranteed to be dead. And that I'm not a huge fan of personally. And I tend to focus more, my books tend to be more action oriented, more of a Baldacci style or a Lee Child, Jack Reacher type of style. And it was interesting writing the fantasy. It's very much coming up with the magic system is very much lining up with your technology system in a science fiction world. I mean, you've got to really think about what you want and how does magic work and how is it a little bit different than what other people have done before and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and you're right, because it has to be consistent, and you're doing that, at least as far as I've gotten so far in that book. There are rules, and you have to follow the rules. You can't just do it any which way, or you can probably get killed. But and you're creating a good foundation for all of that, which makes it, again, interesting, very interesting, how different wizards can wield different elemental powers or spirits or whatever they are. Pretty cool. Pretty cool. Who manages who? You either manage the elemental or they manage you. Kind of like a dog. You're the alpha or they're the alpha. So.
Well, and in any kind of story, there has to be the possibility of something going wrong, right? Mm-hmm. Otherwise, if everything just works for you, it's really boring. If there's a chance that you mess up and you get possessed by some elemental force or worse, then that's the possibility that keeps people a little bit on the edge.
Yep. Now, you're a guy that I think is a scanner. I can see you as somebody who looks at things now, looks at things in the future, and kind of figures it out. What do you foresee as the next big thing technologically?
Well, it's artificial intelligence for sure.
You do think so?
And, okay. Yeah, so there's a lot of people worrying about it right now between Elon Musk mm-hmm. and a whole bunch of highbrow thinkers at all of these major AI companies. And some people believe that when we hit a tipping point where computers match or exceed human level intelligence and ability to learn on their own, not just the kind of machine learning we've got now, but the ability to learn, then their access to all information throughout history is available on the internet. Mm-hmm. And they can read it all at one time.
Sure.
And they can try, computers are trying to learn, like with self-driving cars and things like that. 10 years ago, it was such a hard problem was trying to do a self-driving car, and they were doing it off-road. And so that was a difficult problem because the sensors would see a wall of grass in front of them and not know mm-hmm. what to do. The grass, can we drive through it? Does it hide something that is going mm-hmm. to damage us? That kind of thing. Now they're getting so sophisticated, they're handling things like pedestrians, bicycles, mm-hmm. unexpected things happening in traffic. And we're still a few years away from being totally trustworthy, but even at the extent they're at right now, you're starting to see these self-driving trucks on freeways and things like this, and they're actually much safer than human drivers even at this point.
Oh, yeah.
Because they don't get distracted by the cell phones. They're not tired from driving all night.
No. They don't have the emotional issues or stress. Yeah.
Right. So I really see that as a major changing thing. And things I talk about it in my last book of the Rho Agenda series, the Meridian Ascent, is what will people do when machines can do everything better than you can do, including writing books or writing music? Then people are going to basically be out of a job. And what does society look like at that point? Well, hopefully the AIs are designed to be kind to us poor humans, but as far as keeping humans happy, essentially what you've got at that point is our Native American reservation system, because one of the problems that comes from having a system where the government guarantees you an income and provides it for you in a basic standard of living is when you don't have anything you feel valued about that you're working on, it causes people to get into drugs, alcohol abuse, and that's why alcohol abuse is rampant on a lot of our Indian reservation system. So I took a look at that and I thought about how could you get around that? What kind of a system could you have in place? And it certainly turns out that, hey, the reason socialism hasn't worked anywhere in the world is because of human nature. Mm-hmm. If I see you getting something and you're not doing any hard work for it and I'm working hard, I'm saying, why am I working hard? I'm going to goof off like you if I'm going to get the same benefits. And so there has to be a system that robots, of course, don't worry about that. So for them, socialism would work just fine because they're not counting on any particular special benefits. Right. But then the problem is, even though they're producing, a vast amount of increased production, you have to find a way to distribute the proceeds among the population to keep people from just going berserk and revolting. So anyway, I took a hard look at that in the Meridian Ascent.
Well, and I suppose something that is concerning about the development of AI is that, if AI ever does get to the point where it's equaling human intelligence in basically all of the ways that we are intelligent, human intelligence probably hasn't changed a whole lot over the whole course of human history. But once computers get there, computers get more and more powerful exponentially by the generation. So it will be, it'll be a in the terms of history, it'll be a blink of an eye before they're so much more advanced than us that we can't even comprehend them.
Well, it's interesting. When we ride around town, I see bumper stickers saying, my dog is smarter than your honors student, or something like that. You just go. I'm waiting for somebody to say, my iPhone is smarter than your honors student, or my computer is my computer, my everything. Yeah. And humans are slowly becoming relegated in many things to just not being as smart as some of the devices out there. And
and that's why some of the labs are working. Well, they're working at cross purposes, which is really good. But some are working on augmenting humans with machine augmentation.
Yeah.
And humans actually become superhuman, and not just with machine augmentation, but with DNA manipulation as well.
Well, I know the military's been.
There are people that are trying to keep humans relevant, and I think humans going to be relevant for quite some time. But you're right. When they get smart enough where they start designing their own next generation, and they're manufacturing them automatically, it's gonna be a rapid decline.
But I remember when I was in college, I was right after I got out of college, I was studying Forth, Lisp, Prolog. Those were all the artificial intelligence languages of that day. This is back in the 70s, early 80s. And they were good languages, but it was really hard to really create anything super complicated. And it's all about pattern recognition. So there's so many patterns, so many things that you could recognize. And then, of course, you get into the realm of emotion, spirituality, whatever. It's so hard to make a computer even come close to feeling. It's sort of interesting. There's a book by Dan Brown that came out, I think it was last year. What was it called? Not Genome. I read it. It was a good book. It's all about AI and how AI could definitely take over a lot of stuff. It was pretty cool.
Well, in the movie that came out, where the scientist was creating these women robots that were becoming more and more human level of intelligence. Yeah. Well, anyway, he ends up getting killed by one of them, but that is that's the downside.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, they can become unpredictable, maybe. And of course, we also look at Microsoft, look at Google, look at it. They've got a lot of bugs. Yeah, imagine building an AI machine with a lot of bugs. We could have some interesting, unexpected results. That's all I can think of. So,
well, and another thing is warfare is changing, and with drones and then swarms of drones, one person. Right now, we have rules in place and typically in our drone warfighters that are, they're sitting at Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada, and they're flying drones with their CIA counterparts sitting right there beside them that are flying in Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria. Yemen. And typically there's one guy flying the plane and there's another guy sitting beside him that's running the payloads and the weapon systems and, seeing what the cameras from the drone are seeing. But but that's not really required. I mean, if we allow drones to make their own decisions based on kind of a goal set, identifying good guys, bad guys by a set of rules, then one person could actually, swarm of drones, it could be thousands of them. Mm-hmm. And at that point in time, you could have a lot of issues with tremendous killing power in one person's hands.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
I think actually nowadays in the Korean demilitarized zone between North and South Korea, they have some totally automated weapons systems. Like they have these guns that will call out to people. Like when they detect a person, they'll call out and basically tell them to turn back, or else they'll shoot if they get any closer.
Yeah. Right. And the demilitarized zone is a crazy place.
It is.
And I've been there a number of times when I was working with the Defense Department.
It's interesting. Well, Richard, what do you foresee next for you? You've got, I think, a couple more books you're finishing up on the Endarian Prophecy. What comes after that? Anything you got in plans?
Well, I just finished my 14th novel. And so I had 9 that were in the Rho Agenda series. And I've got this 6-book series that's the Endarian Prophecy series. I just finished the 5th book in that series. And I'm working with my editor on that right now, but I'll be done with that, with the 6th book, by probably the end of next March. Mm-hmm. And after I finish editing that with my editor, then I probably am going to go back and revisit some of the characters. I really got to know and like the characters that I had in my Rho Agenda series. Over the years, they became like family. Mm-hmm. So I kind of want to follow up on where I left them and see what happens.
That would be cool. Yeah, as a fan of the Rho Agenda, that would be a really cool idea. I'll bet you get a lot of people who agree with that one. It's right.
Well, and also, there's a lot of people that like sci-fi that don't mm-hmm. like fantasy, and vice versa.
Yeah.
So it's 2 different audiences. Some people like both, but I wanted to go back, and since I love both, I wanted to try my hand at fantasy too. And I've enjoyed that, but I think I'll end up going back and spending most of my time in science fiction.
Interesting. Anyway, Richard, we wish one more thing. Part of why it's called Life Edge. We always ask guests one question that is simple in some respects and difficult in others, and that is, what was it in life that gave you an edge, that made you who you are, who made you successful, or made you accomplish the things that you're doing? Kind of that defining thing, if you have one.
Well, I've thought about this quite a bit, and I think the most important trait someone can have, and it's a learnable trait, trainable trait, is finish what you start. And if you never finish what you start, if you start something and then you quit, and then you go do something else and you quit. And now, I'm not to say you never change paths, but I always made it a principle that if I'm starting a project, I'm not quitting that project halfway through. I'm going to finish that project. I may move on to a different company. I may move to a different project that is more challenging or more enticing to me, but I want to finish it. And that's why when I started writing my first book and I ran into this issue of being too critical of what I'd already written, and it ground me to a halt. That's why when my wife Carol came up to me and said, "Rick, finish the damn book. You can edit it later." And I was like, whoa, who knew? You can edit the book after you're done. It can be crap. Your first draft is probably going to be crappy, but you can come back, you can fix it up and make it into something good. But you can't become a bestseller or anything else if you don't finish what you started.
Good point.
It's a really good one.
Yep, it's a very, very good point. So, Richard, it's been a pleasure meeting you, at least virtually here, and like I said in emails and just talking, love your work. You do great work. It brings me back to my really interested youth in science fiction and everything else, where I kind of feel that passion. So, does he have a new book out? Is there something? Oh, cool. There's more books out. You're looking forward to it, and that's great. Sometimes I think I'm jaded, and I go,
I've really had a good time. I've really had a good time chatting with you. And if anybody wants to look me up, just go on Amazon, type in Richard Phillips, and a ton of my books will show up. So
yep.
I'm looking
and
forward to.
We're going to put links below in the show notes so they can go to your sites, and we'll even put them up to the book. We don't do Amazon links, so we'll just have a link to your books right below in the notes.
Or my website, which is thesecondship.com.
Yep. So we'll put all of that in there. So great, Richard. I really appreciate sharing some time with you. And again, if you haven't read the books, or if you're reading the books, keep reading them. And because it also holds true with a book: finish what you started, finish that book, or buy it, then finish it. Have a good one, everyone. We'll see you next time on Life Edge. Richard, thanks a lot.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, everyone.
And it's a wrap.